That could be not good.
Have they ever gotten that granular on the CCP budget?
No, I think so. I mean, not in my, I shouldn't say no, because I wasn't here the first 10 years of it.
Not since not with the CCP, but they're rolling out an entire different budget process this year with the budget workshop in front of a full board public hearing, not a budget subcommittee. So
There could be feedback.
kind of reflective of maybe a little bit more oversight.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely see specific feedback coming on in April ahead of the full budget presentation. And then like what happened last year during budget adoption, one of the supervisors didn't like the staffing plan, so he did not vote for that whole portion of the budget. And it, similar to what you're saying, Jeff, if the CCP has line item by line item approval and the board wants to take specific issue with one of those line items, it would be easier for them to do so and bring it back here for discussion than blanketly disapprove the CCP budget. And now we're all back to square one and none of us have funding going forward. So I think your suggestion for piecemealing the approval process here is a good one, just in case.
It's the first good idea, man.
To your point on the agency rollout, there will be a single agency budget presentation for each agency, and probation being part of HHSA. I assume this will be within the HHSA budget. And so like my understanding of the process is like we would do that hearing, and then if they have a specific issue with part of that, there is still a subcommittee opportunity to follow up after the fact and straighten things out. So that's how it would flow. Yeah, I like the idea of separate elections too.
Work for you. Hey, typing it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, recording though.
And I just wonder, I might not understand it fully, probably don't understand it fully, but I wonder if it could happen the opposite way too, where they'd be more likely to pick little pieces out to have issue with if they were presented as individual line items as opposed to one big proposal. Like, I wonder if we want to invite that level. I don't know. Scrutiny, yes.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine on that.
If they are getting to that level of detail, it's going to be because there's a specific reason and they're going to pick it, whether it's aggregated or broken out.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So, I mean, I guess that would kick it back to this process, but in the interest of efficiency, I would rather, if there's issues with one or more, we talk about those instead of with every single one of them.
All right. So I've heard a variety of ways. So do we want to do it? Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to take a vote on this. It's just a process. And I know you had talked about I don't know if you want to talk about that real quick with it.
But that's
Moving forward of having a budget.
Oh, I was thinking about this budget in general, just as the CCP voting member, and thinking there's a lot to discuss here, but with a deficit budget at the level that we're looking at, I just think it might warrant an off budget season specific budget conversation around policy and allocation and everything from fund balance to revenues, forecasting. It seems like a lot of the stuff we've done this way for a long time because we've done it that way, and maybe it would be worth revisiting, but not today, obviously. I'm comfortable with spending today because it's almost a decade worth of spending if we keep spending at the same level with the same revenue. But I think it warrants, I'm not comfortable saying that I'm comfortable doing it for a decade. I just think today there's plenty of money there and I'm comfortable with that, taking it as one motion, but.
I think the only difference that I have is when we broaden the criminal justice application for CCP, I'm not comfortable with capping mine at 50%, since the jail hits every single part of the criminal justice system where all the agencies are feeding into that we've historically just structured it off of the very specific criminal element of a 1170H, therefore it was capped at 50. So I would say in the the overall budget is not a 10-year.
Sure. Yeah, and that's why I think it would be important to prioritize talking about that because, you know, who knows which way any of these things move, but it would buy us a year to have that conversation. I think it's more than one meeting to have that conversation. It needs to be a focused, strategic conversation.
And my concerns are primarily sort of looking at the big picture as well. And as I expressed last time, it's sort of a peak in terms of the projected revenue, and yet used, what is it, almost $500,000 of fund balance where we're estimating to in 25, 26, where like budget as presented is another 600,000. And yes, we have fund balance, but it seems to me like it should be a more strategic conversation around what do we do with that fund balance versus like whatever, like typically that we've had carryover proposals here. Last year, Dan brought the pause proposal and we kicked it over to innovation. And like my aggregate suggestion would be that we like beef up the innovation process and have more of an RFP for new proposals versus, you know, dipping into fund balance on the basis of, that we have a few years of sustainability there. I'm also not confident, as I expressed last year, that our budget estimate from the state is real this cycle. So I'm like totally insecure about spending our baseline over that estimate.
We definitely have a broader perspective on the confidence of all of the different things, regardless of administration, just what is happening. So I don't have that same knowledge base, so I'd have to rely on really what you've been saying in the last, just with the major changes, some of the, at least in that sense.
So no growth, like all our county departments right now are struggling with a no growth position countywide. And so it just, yeah, it seems challenging. And like CCP has, my understanding of how the funding can be spent is sort of several paths. There's the direct costs associated with the people that became county responsibility. That's what re-electing is, right? And so you have the jail and you have probation and you have DA and public defender get allocations with that. The Grass Valley 20,000, I think, was supposed to be specifically for like the costs associated with that population. And then there's the more like innovative system things that we've been talking about with the strategic plan. And it just seems to me that the innovation project, rather than dealing with 50,000, if we need to start spending that fund balance, then let's like have a process around what goes into new programs versus whoever throws one out at the annual budget cycle, you know. We've totally disrupted the
No,
intention to go.
I mean, yeah, and these are, I think, the conversations, like you were saying, that I think we need to have. Probably don't have time to get through all that today, like getting into the philosophy of everything. But yeah, I mean, from my perspective, you know, this is, I mean, CCP started prior to 109 with 678 in 2009. So it's been a long process, and the original kind of intent, there's no statutory limitations on how we use the funding, as far as I know. There is a push to, one was the impact, which at this point, we should have a fairly good idea of what that impact looks like, because PRCS is kind of a stagnant. That's not really going to change a whole lot. The 1170 can switch a little bit, but the PRCS piece, I mean, absent them realigning parole, which I think is probably the next shoe to drop in the next couple of years. But we know what that is. And then the other piece was the innovation piece relative to how to address this population differently than the state had in the past. And that was kind of the process and the purpose, at least back when it first started. And so that's how I kind of see it. Yes, we use fund balance. I know Angie had said generally it's like 100 to 150,000 that we don't spend. I mean, obviously we're estimating that from year to year.
Yeah, historically, if we have, you know, like the budget goes into fund balance, but once we, end the year, we haven't used fund balance typically, so we always come in under what we're budgeting. Historically, that is not.
And I don't know if you have any, inside baseball on the, what you call it, the budget projections from Josh or anyone.
No more than what Ryan's saying, but yeah, I mean, ultimately, all they have to go off at this point in time is the, the governor's budget estimates. And that I think that, LAO doesn't probably agree with those estimates, so it is a little bit up in the air.
And the LAO estimated an $18 billion deficit and the governor's budget estimated like a $3 billion deficit. So it's a big difference.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, some of the reason we have the fund balance is because we've said, hey, this is what the budget is. It got cut because of the expected projected numbers. So those numbers went down. We ended up with more surplus, and then that went into revenue funds instead of supporting original requests in some of those years as well. So it's like that fund balance is built up because we under budgeted for several years at times too. So obviously you get fund balance because you're putting money there instead of where those.
Are we like with us for funding positions, if that position goes vacant for a while, then the money goes back into the.
I know there's years where we put in requests at like this rate, it got approved over here, and there was like a $500,000 savings. And then all of a sudden that's getting peaked, but we got less than what we were asking for, the CCP budgeting. So that happens like from certain years, and that has its own impact as well.
Yeah, I mean, from my recollection of what we've, gone through over the last decade is that, we know what our estimate is of our, revenue, this time of the year. And ultimately that's what we budget for. And then it depends. And half the time, like Chief said, stuff doesn't come in at the, we don't spend everything we expect to spend. Things don't go as they, anticipated. But yeah, sometimes we have gotten more revenue and sometimes it's been less expenditures than anticipated, or a combination of both.
So yeah, and I mean, there's a variety of ways to approach it. I know Placer County had one meeting in 2011. They haven't had a meeting since. They divided it up by percentage and they never talked about it again. Never submitted a plan, never submitted anything to the state. So, and there's some places that have bound plans, that are ridiculously long, have all kinds of stuff attached to them. So there's a variety of ways that people approach this. So for today, I've heard some people say like itemize it, some people say don't itemize it. I don't really want to take a vote on that, but is there a feeling one way or the other? I mean, for part of I think Aaron maybe be the best person to give input regarding this, seeing that the head budgeteer.
Gave my input.
So,
I mean, the reason is to prevent having to come back here and have the same conversation because one line item in the budget, the board didn't agree with and wants more work done on, right? So you could ask for, if there's any item on this budget that folks want to have a discussion on, and the rest are presumed approved as presented.
like just parse out some of them.
Right. I think there's three that I highlighted that are significantly higher based on last year or current year. So I was reading those proposals in particular just to understand why the increase, if we are expanding the program, if it's just cost of doing business has increased, what was the rationale behind that? And I think this group should have a conversation about whether or not you want to grow the program in the next year, or whether you want to have a status quo with a mid-year conversation about changing the methodology and thought process, or some other combination.
So yeah, I mean, that's a good way to put it is, I mean, one way that makes sense in my head is kind of like the new stuff in the old stuff. You know what I mean? Like the stuff that we've approved for the last however many years is in one pot, and then the discussion is around the new stuff. I mean, I don't know if that is more palatable. And I know some of the old stuff has some increases to it. I know a handful of those, so we could discuss those as well. And I think most of those increases we talked about last time were cost of employees and stuff like that. I think the VA's was from a part-time person to a full-time person, not full-time being fully billed to CCP, but full-time in that now there's benefits and stuff like that attached to the person versus the part-timer. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve? We can list out those items that have historically been funded.
That we approve the items that have historically funded.
I think you should list those out of your notes. I don't know if anybody knows what you're talking about.
I kind of need to know specifically what those are.
So probation, the jail, the treatment, the training's only been like 2 years. GPPB has a new proposal this year, public defenders, status quo. So like HHSA has some new stuff in there, so we can pull that one out.
Is that in line with the three that you were talking about?
Yeah,
Three increase.
I had noted Grass Valley, the district attorney, public defender. I'm sorry, not public defender, HHSA.
You had Grass Valley, HHC, and who else?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, so I have a motion to approve, and I'm looking at the roll up. I'm guessing I see it out in front of some people here. Probation and treatment, training, public defender, and sheriff's department.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, okay, yes. Sorry.
So you're stating them in the fact of what's going from us, also stating them, so.
I'm not, I'm just trying to summarize the motion.
Yeah, I'm moving that we approve the status quo items, so everything except for HHSA, Grass Valley, and
Yeah.
And I think what I'm doing is public defender is less important to say.
They're listed twice and differently, and the PD's office landed under the HSSA proposal this year in a different way than in the past.
They're both status quo, though, I will say that the PD item, both PD items are status quo, neither one of them is new.
yeah, it's a different part of the HHSA proposal. That's Carmen's position is within HHSA.
For clarification, where is the behavioral health proposal falling? Is that under HHSA?
Yes.
Right,
So I'm sorry, did we approve the public defender or is it being, is it included in HHS?
Public defender that's listed on this summary sheet is part of the status quo. Public defender piece, which is
Right.
Carmen's personal service coordinator position, is it within HHSA is being pulled along with.
and after I get a second, we can have discussion on it as far as I'm now, so. I get a second for that. Second, all right. Any discussion?
Yeah, my comments are, as it relates to the reason for doing this, I'm uncomfortable with this, the separation based upon the board's 4/5 piece that was being talked about, because this is a statutorily defined body, voting body. And I think that we should be taking the budget as a whole, and if there's an impact that the board wants to override, which is totally their purview and great to have that oversight, then I think it should come back to this board, because the impact on one program they may choose maybe should then be set in relation to priority of the CCP as a whole. And that, I think, kind of changes the purview there.
You're saying it might shift other items and priorities, like if
Yeah.
they said, oh, we don't want to fund probation,
let's say they want
And then it
to,
might be like, okay, well, then maybe I'll change my proposal because we wanna.
well, then it has an overall impact to the overall budget. Yeah, so I think it's a budget is a budget, and if one of them is any piece of the budget is concerning enough to the board of supervisors and it achieves a 4/5 vote, then I think this body has to do the work to resubmit that.
And it's not gonna
Regardless
be-
of the process and the impact to the budget, that's just an unfortunate outcome of a decision like that.
And it's not gonna be, since we don't have the plan anymore, I was told it's no longer, the budget in essence, kind of is the plan, but it would revert back to the normal budgeting process. So it wouldn't be that 4/5 voting, right? It would be like they approve the budget from the normal 3-2 or whatever,
And I'm not opposed to discussing those items if we're called on. I just of the opinion that the CCP body should make one motion for one budget after those discussions have been made.
I think you can still do that, and I would offer that if the board were to 4/5 vote against the CCP as a whole, having had individual approvals at this body just means that you don't necessarily have to discuss those things if you didn't want to change this. But the board doesn't gonna say or direct where to spend the money, they're just gonna say, try again.
Yeah, it's like it's proficient.
Come back to this group to make the proposal changes.
Yeah, because I mean, they'd be looking at the whole service budget unit. Whatever we're calling it.
Cost center.
the other discussion.
I'll say my concern is not related. I think that the board might vote against it. I think we started talking about that because you were updating us on how the process works. My concern is from the perspective of CCP and how we decide to spend into fund balance or not in a given year. What the board might think about. So, and then another point I'd like to make on the things that are ongoing things. I think there's, as I mentioned last time, still opportunities to leverage additional funding and to potentially increase the pot for more innovative ideas and programs. For instance, the jail-based therapist says within it that with Cal-Aim in the jail and with justice-involved Medi-Cal available, that there could be offsetting revenue that some of the public defender positions that are baseline, like Carmen's position, is potentially billable. So if we're able to fully explore those things, then we can build a bigger pot to do things that are more in alignment with building out the system according to the strategic plan. If there's gaps in the sheriff because of that 50% cap, I think we have opportunity to reflect on process and leverage additional income.
Are you saying theoretically the expenditures at the end of the year on AB 109 might not be realized in full budgeted amount because they're offset by other billable revenue?
Right, or if we can get Carmen's position billable and we don't need AB 109 funds for that anymore, then next year or even mid-year, there's more money to go around.
You would only be asking for 40% of what we're currently, or something like that, like it.
Any other discussion? All right, if we want to have a vote, I guess we have a motion, so we either have to have a vote or start again. So all those in favor, let's do raise your hand so I can see all those in favor, raise your hand. Let's restate that motion. The motion is to approve. Make sure I get this right, Ryan, you're the one who made it. So probation department, treatment, CCP training, part of the public defender, right?
All the public defender that's listed here.
Because there were two different versions of that table.
Yeah, the newest version, because you left something that you updated.
No, but you guys had asked to break out the pre-trial portion.
Okay.
So the public defender attorney position, like maybe we can attorney versus case management.
The motion is to approve the request as presented here, minus Grass Valley, HSA, and DA. Just to simplify.
All right. Yes, it does. Yeah. All those in favor, raise your hand. 6. All those None in favor, raise your hand. Any abstentions? See none, okay, so motion passes, I think that was 6-1. All right, so the next part of it are those 3 items. That we didn't talk about, so do we wanna, who wants to start? We can just have a conversation, or do you want to have a motion first? And then the discussion, or however, it doesn't matter.
You know, line by line, right? You want discussion and a
Well,
vote
we
on
can do
each
it
of
as
the
a
traditional
group, or,
one.
yeah, I think that's probably best.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah,
what.
you don't want them as a group because of the racing station.
So you want to start, Ryan, with health and human services?
Sure. I mean, Health and Human Services, the piece that's new is the Veterans Program. I would suggest that we not include that in the budget. And per my earlier suggestion of kicking things to innovation and trying to increase the amount that's available in that innovation project, I would have David West resubmit as part of an innovation proposal if there's support for that as process.
Yeah, the only question I had about that, and I think I relayed it to him, would be, I would just be curious if there was a way to quantify the number of folks that is justice involved, at the very least, that they're serving.
Going down to 3 to 5 veterans served a month in the jail, but that's part of this.
3 to 5. But I'm sorry, I mean, that's just my analytical brain of there's gotta be a number of last year we served 20 veterans, you know what I mean?
I mean, we absolutely, do you mean justice involved veterans or?
Yeah.
The number
Well, I
of
mean,
veteran-
it could be both, so we know
Definitely
what
tracking.
percentage of it is, you know what I mean, of
Yeah.
20% or whatever.
Tracking both of those.
Does DA track that? You'll have countywide information. We have our. We can track our side, but we'll have.
It's as they have.
Yeah, we got that in our.
If they tell you.
Yeah, if they tell us, we would have a pretty good number of who's currently at least on probation.
Page
we're
2 of
getting-
that proposal says 115 were booked in Wayne Brown in 24-25. So there's your
There you
one
go.
metric,
There.
although it's probably, yeah, that would be an estimate.
I mean, I think what I'm hearing Ryan say is we're not even really talking about the merits of the proposal at the moment, talking about the process. And the process would be, since this is a new program, an innovative program, the board would decide to set aside a certain amount of funding and then have people apply for that amount of funding through a different process, not whether or not this is the time to approve.
I do feel like if that's the way we go, we probably, I mean, how much do we have in innovation right now?
Maybe on the last page of that.
But in those, we might need to go above and beyond what is statutorily kind of you pull out.
I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, to be able to make sure and have that discussion that we've been pushing down the road about, is it just the one time and then good luck to you sustaining this program, or how does it come into the fold?
Right. Like in an RFP, we could ask people to speak to the strategic plan objectives and the evidence-based practices, and then sustainability as well. And if it's something that's so successful that it wants to become a core part of CCP, then it can be part of that annual budget process. But if it's not otherwise, what's your sustainability plan?
You want to talk about your?
Yeah, and I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I don't know where discussion left off, if there are some specific questions that address what our increases to move from part-time to full-time, but and that's evaluating our participation in the alternative courts, preventative courts. This role seems like a long time coming. I think when we put somebody in there that's part-time, they have part-time capabilities, they have low capacity, and what we've seen, especially in the last couple of years, increasing in their part, separate and apart from realignment and some of these goals here is to form legislation that puts more emphasis on the alternative court system in general. So it's been taxing on a part-time attorney. I think the withdrawal from their capacity and capabilities and basically the resources from full-time attorneys on a regular basis, just because of their part-time status, they have abilities. So between that, getting someone in there, there's the communication with probation, communication with other justice partners is compromised by that part-time status. So just getting the overall push, even in the last couple of years, for alternative courts. This just seems like long overdue. We're trying to expand services up to Truckee and some of these alternative courts, and certainly they would be covering that. So I think that's the gist of it. I think it just didn't increase costs too. I think Aaron made mention that as part of things that we're seeing through the various additional requests, certainly just general costs are going up. So it just seems like the right time, at the right time. So Michelle, do you want to add any sort of details on that, what you've seen from some of the metrics we're capturing?
I mean, realistically, our hours that we would be putting towards CCP are the same. It's just moving from a part-time temp to a full-time. Our part-time temp will be ending his assignment June 30th. So our hope is that a full-time person can't take over this workload and caseload.
I know it could be covered other ways, but is it actually going to be one staff that would be covering all of the alternative courts, you know, fixing the diverse things, or is it going to be split? It's a plan that happens.
I think the former, I think the plan would be for that person to cover all the alternative courts that
Dedicated to it.
and dedicated to it. And again, as Michelle mentioned, that individuals coming up, and so we have to rehire and recruit for a part-time position. It's extremely difficult to get the competent person, and we need a competent person. I think Dave's competent, but I think we need a higher level of attorney in that position, given the importance that's been thrust upon us for good reason, but nevertheless.
Yeah, I've seen firsthand some of the difficulties, I think, with the halftime and, you know, those issues.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult to hire attorneys for part-time temporary positions with very little benefits.
I think limited term too.
Or sorry, part-time temp.
I always have that conversation about limited term because nobody wants a
Oh,
limited term
yeah.
position as well, because they want sustainability.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Laugh, it's a-
Attorneys.
I know.
Yeah, we get to that.
Right.
All right, any questions?
Process question, like, is it, are you switching an already approved full-time position over to this, or has there been approval for a full-time position related to this? Because
Michelle can speak to this. There's pending RSC that has not been approved yet, and certainly that would be considered, but I think regardless.
Yeah, so if our RSC, we did want to combine 2 part-time temps into a full-time. If that RSC is not approved, our goal is still to have an existing full-time attorney take this CCP.
Utilizing the increased requests.
Yeah,
switching whatever other workload over.
yeah. So if we hire again for a part-time temp, they would take on a different caseload.
Any other questions?
That's the public defender piece of the
Yeah.
HSC.
Is there an increase spell? And I thought that was why it's
145 to 185. That's why it was paid.
okay.
Yeah, the jail-based therapist.
Yeah, this therapist has increased because of the, because it was a partial year.
Sorry.
I think Ryan was talking about the jail-based therapy.
Yeah.
And see the.
It was the jail-based therapist.
Oh, yeah, what's the Carmen? I just heard the name Carmen.
Carmen is the personal services coordinator and public defender who works.
You gotta talk about that one, yeah, right?
No, and that
That
was,
Oh, that was the status quo. Okay, gotcha.
that's just the new one, that therapist.
I thought that's different.
It is the status quo one, but it's not the status, it's the status quo one that's in HHSA, not the status quo one that we was on already.
Right.
Yes.
Just the white part. Okay.
Hold on one second, Jeff. I just am stealing the screen share real quick. I did want to share, and this aligns with what Jesse was just talking about as well, but this is really critical for our jail-based therapist positions. So you can see our referrals to our court-based programs have increased significantly, more than tripled since 2022. Each of those referrals requires an assessment. That assessment is billable time under CalAIM. What is not billable time is all of the work that goes into that's not client facing. And so that's why this position feels critical to behavioral health. It also corresponds with what Jesse was saying about his program as well. But I just wanted to put the picture up here because I think the numbers tell the story of how much time we are spending in our alternative court programs. And this is just the number of people referred. And with every referral, there's an assessment, and then we carry that through to completion. So thank you for giving me the floor.
Yes. Slide.
All right,
Wrong with me.
that's you, yeah.
I think we spent a significant amount of time at the last meeting talking about our proposal. It is new, significant, and different. It's really an attempt to take street law enforcement way upstream and try to be preventative, with a program that was kind of coined out of Seattle, Washington, called the LEADS program that, we've heard about pre-trial stuff, we've heard about the diversionary courts. This is a pre-arrest diversion and case management type of approach, trying to hopefully reduce those charges, reduce intakes. Of course, there would be a fair amount of arrests still occurring, but hopefully with more coordinated access and linkages to services, leveraging the CalAIM programs and the provider-based system there, like the community providers trying to get people connected to those services. So actually liaisoning and trying to connect more people to those services, particularly to service providers that are CalAIM service providers, so that they can then co-case management until such time hopefully someone stabilizes and isn't being seen at the street level as much. There was a comment at the last meeting about like the countywide component of the program as opposed to the more local approach with the city. Just ran a few stats, something I thought was pretty interesting as it relates to one of the metrics we keep track of, which are people who are generally not housed and living on the street. Just since July 1st, if you look at that data from different police agencies or police law enforcement agencies, the city of Grass Valley is about 10 times more impacted with that type of call, and almost 40. So compared to the other municipalities, almost a 40 times increase to the unincorporated areas. So that's why I saw Grass Valley being a spot to really focus our initiatives. There's a significant number of non-government as well as government-based service providers whose service locations are in the city. That tends to create an impact in the city. And then we have both in-town impact and then around the periphery of town folks coming and going into the city. So I just thought that if there's an agency that would be able to try to roll this out and use evidence-based practices out of Seattle and trying to work with a university in the future to really hone in on the data that we want to collect and see the impact. That was the ask here. This is I think it's really important work. I think it's different than what we traditionally see. And for that reason, I think I can get some commitment from the city, and I realize this is a big ask. And so if I don't know, this would be kind of like the board of supervisors process, like make a proposal here, have to bring it to my council to see if I can get some of the buy-in. But I realize this is such a significant number, kind of like Brian's talking about with knocking it down. I've been doing a little bit of work and think that we could knock it down by a third. So instead of 150 ballpark, it's like 100 to help get the program off the ground. And then my hope is that we can find other funding and or show the benefit such that the city would never want to stop doing it, and ultimately fund it through future budgetary asks and not leave it here in the CCP forever. But I also say that with a caveat that I'm not saying that I think I can necessarily not be back here next year, showing the data, showing hopefully the positive impacts, and then work towards future city-based funding. And of course, if the data doesn't show that it's viable, then we could pivot and maybe go a different direction.
So just to clarify, so now the new ask is 100K.
Well, I mean, the ask is the full amount, but I'm throwing that out.
You're willing to do it.
Yeah, I mean.
And you normally, like previous, like last year, was it 20K? Is that why you guys done it?
So we've
So, like-
been budgeted at 20. We haven't been able to bill for that historically. It's been somewhere
That's
between
been
half and 3/4 of that. So really, I guess it's somewhere between, the delta is somewhere between 80 and 130, depending on how we, if there's any support in the room to move it forward.
Any other questions? Looks like you were ready to say something, right?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it as you referenced at the last meeting, and I really appreciate the spirit and intent behind it. I'm a little shocked by the 10 times the service calls related figure. Grass Valley, at least in terms of the point in time count, has 65% of the county's overall total, which is definitely disproportional to the other jurisdictions, but not on that same.
You're talking about where they're laying their head, right?
It's either like if they're sheltered, it's basically where their shelter is, and you referenced the services being located there. And if they're unsheltered, it's where they reported they slept the night before. So, definitely disproportionately Grass Valley is the homeless issue, but not 10 times the proportionality. So curious to dig into that.
Yeah, okay, so too.
Yeah, because, I mean, I'll add to that. One, people often sleep within unincorporated area that migrate right to Grass Valley, because we get calls and we deal with them. It's the whole East Bennett Street.
For
Or
sure.
a stone's throw across, and you have all the same problems and things like that. Still a problem nonetheless. I guess and I asked this question, I don't know if it was ever answered because we ran out of time, but last time I thought you said you guys weren't wanting to do case management. What I hear today is you do want case management. One of the benefits of the MCT team is that we do have case management with behavioral health, and that's where that big tie-in comes together. And so when your team case managing, but we have a case management plan that potentially exists, and those things don't cross right. That's super problematic because we're going to end up in the same boat. If we make a reentry plan out of the jail, we have behavioral health is on the team, we have ROIs and things in place, and that's what allows us to have all that connectivity so that when we release with a plan, behavioral health knows the plan. We now could potentially end up with 2 different plans and things not being coordinated amongst that.
Well, I hope you wouldn't have 2 different plans. I mean, that would be.
But if you guys create your own and you don't have that ability to share and we can't share with you, then you end up in that boat.
I think we would have ROIs for the clients. I mean, would be the goal. And I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. I think that
It took us like a year to get.
Hopefully we work in coordination with each other and
I
not.
hear you. It's just challenging because of the HIPAA and all the various things. It took us well over a year to get through ROIs with behavioral health, both because of CGIS issues, but also with HIPAA and behavioral health issues and sharing data. And a lot of that's scrubbed because of the fact that what it is and how we can interact, because it is complicated. And then, when I hear you say that the 10 times, our mental health folks go out with people all the time, our NCT team does. The one thing that I found that was interesting, originally when we did the MCT team, our analyst at the time said, hey, we're going to show a 20% decrease in use of force. Now, I didn't read it, of course, until I came into the program. And then I'm like, how am I going to show something that doesn't occur, that was lowered? And so stats are misleading, right? But to say that hey, it's 10 times more, I don't know what data you looked at versus ours or whatever, but our people are going out on a regular basis. The outcome of that depends on what happens there. So a lot of times the outcome's different than if a peace officer did run to the scene, because our therapists sometimes take over the role and it doesn't need any of those other services. They make a plan at home and they really don't have that same documentation in CAD that we would have if it was a peace officer that went to it. So I'm interested, like Ryan said, in the data, because it doesn't jive necessarily with what I'm seeing, but
We're talking about 2 different things.
Well, maybe to spring off that a little bit, So I think it would be a good idea. Anecdotally, it seems like Brunswick Basin is just a hotbed of activity that would be related to this mission here. But what type of metrics would you anticipate capturing at the end of the year that would support a position like this? Have you guys thought about that? Because again, anecdotally, it seems.
Yeah, so there'd be both quantitative and qualitative. Qualitative would be like stronger community relationships and trust. So key stakeholder interviews, things like that. We would track the escalation or de-escalate. So previous criminal behavior versus post-program criminal behavior. So the escalation versus de-escalation. If we were able to improve information sharing and tailored interventions, to Sam's point around those issues that are not currently existing today, that hopefully could be in the future. The diversion outcomes, so both criminally justice involved outcomes, as well as potential pre-criminal justice involvement diversions. And then housing and stability impacts for the individuals being served.
What prevents us from doing any of that right now, though? Like, what's the program bringing in? I guess that's where I'm like lost most.
It would be taking somebody, specifically assigning them so that they aren't as similar to your NCT, how you have specialty people doing
You have
special.
that person employed right now, right? That could theoretically do all those things.
Correct. They
So then
theoretically could, but it's a staffing
No,
impact, so I would backfill the position.
Then I worry about supplantation, like, and then it's like.
It's the opposite of supplanting. It's actually backfilling a position. So that person can do the work. Supplanting would be getting funded, having them do the work and not filling the position.
So you want CCP to pay for a peace officer position is essentially what we're talking about then.
Correct.
So they wouldn't be doing all.
Which is pretty common throughout the state.
But they wouldn't be doing all of those things. Your other person would be doing all those things.
Right, which is why the city would be contributing in kind to have that person doing those works at a higher level, including all the especially training, gear, vehicle, incentive pays, and the CCP would only be paying for a smaller portion of that to help kickstart the program.
So I mean, where I'm looking at it, because I hear where you're coming from on it, saying like home team's been great, we've used them multiple times, they're nice if they're a county program, they can respond anywhere in the county. And then it's one centralized information piece. I think that all makes complete sense. I guess there's been some argument about, you know, I don't think there's any argument that the cities are more impacted by the clientele that we're talking about serving than the counties overall. Might be argument if it's 10 times as much or not, which I get. I think, I mean, you even referenced it, eventually they come into the cities, and it's usually where the cause problems. Even if they sleep in the county, they sleep there, and they come in the city to buy their alcohol, or whatever else, to buy and cause problems. That's where we end up getting more calls for it. So I think it goes back to what you were referencing there, Ryan, the point in time count. Yeah, they're out there, but then the calls, they're probably being referenced more in the city. I do think, though, we're kind of arguing, right? I don't know, but the idea sounds amazing to me. It sounds like a really innovative, great idea that if it was with the county, we probably have no problem with it. So the argument is, should be with the county or should be with the cities, I think where it kind of boils down to. But for me, for a pilot program, does it really matter? It seems like a really innovative idea. I think it would work in the county. I also think it would work in Grass Valley. I think it would probably work in Truckee. Probably wouldn't work real well in Nevada City. I'm just not big enough. But if it's an innovative idea that does align with CCP, because it definitely, in my mind, would be used for mental health, recidivism, all the ideas that CCP was put forward for. I think the biggest thing that I do agree with you on is, could it cause conflict where the two organizations are conflicting? But I don't think that's like if you have two in a bigger jurisdiction where they have two gang task forces. You know, there is, HIPAA gets more involved in that. I understand that it's mental health, but I do think that there's ways that both complement each other, as opposed to being conflicting with each other.
Right, but so if that's the case, right, it's like, do I then turn around next year and say, I'd like a correctional officer to deal with people? Because we have to deal with all these folks that are gonna get arrested and brought in anyway. Do I hire a correctional counselor? Hold on, I heard you out. Throwing out my thing. Do I next year come back and say, I'd like a correctional counselor to be paid for to cover these tasks that are being generated by this work? And I think to a certain extent, it's like the city's getting taxes and they get all these things to cover like services. And then now it's the CCP that's paying for those things. And I think we've like kind of avoided like some of the positional things unless they've been like really targeted as this whole. At least that's the way I've taken this whole thing. So I'm just trying to understand where everybody's coming from. I do want to understand what the position is doing. I'm not a voting person, so it's not like I have a vote on this. But also when I look at it as like a community member and I'm trying to understand, it's like you mentioned Truckee could use it too. It's like, so then does Truckee come in and ask for another position? Should we fund it over Grass Valley or Grass Valley over Truckee? Like it starts getting like into that really tough thing. So I hear you,
It's, yeah, I mean, I get it.
but why not have like, but I'm not saying I'm against, like, because our clinicians have been amazing. So I'm full on, like, I think the clinicians are great.
So should I request a clinician and then you support it?
And
I mean, when you look at, across the state and CCPs, and this goes back to that idea of other conversation to the future, it's not uncommon just to staff law enforcement bodies, street bodies. I mean, in Nevada County, we've historically kept it on the incarceration side. That's not to say that I wouldn't also be supportive of CCP dollars going across law enforcement organizations in Nevada County. But in this particular incident, we're taking a community that's disparately impacted by, today's misdemeanors, tomorrow's AB 109er, and we know that people's arrest have a higher propensity for future and more significant arrests, if not intervened. So trying to tailor a specific program to try to make an upstream impact, as opposed to just saying, hey, just give us a police body, because there used to be 160,000 state prisoners, now there's under 100,000. Where do those 60,000 peoples go? Back into the communities in California. So we're dealing with them. So.
I think the other good point you made though is, what is the community? Is this where the community wants the money spent? I would think, I'm not a voting member here, but I am a voter in the community. This is exactly where I want the money spent. I would want this money that came from the state prison systems that is coming back to the counties, spent on programs for my bigger cities where I'm gonna have
But the cities have done that. They've gone taxes to gain more peace officers to provide services.
But
I don't think that constituents aren't willing to support the police department. I hear that the police department's been supported. The resources are there. I guess my question is it hasn't been turned on. It's not, in my mind, like out of a lack of like the backfill of a peace officer, you have that resource on hand. And he's good. He's very good. I put a lot of faith in him. Not saying that, but I don't think anything stops it from happening right now.
But you think I should, unfill a patrol position to be able to do that?
I mean, that's a choice for the city. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what, okay.
All right, so let's move this one along. I mean, just for the sake of, adding, I was gonna say 2 cents, and it might be 10 cents at this point, but I think, in full transparency, over the last several years, I mean, it might be the last, everyone been the chief, I don't know. Having come from a department that had a lot more kind of innovative, I don't want to say innovative approaches, but through the CCP funded innovative approaches for across the law enforcement spectrum for other, cities as well as the county and stuff like that. I had kind of pushed Alex to look into some evidence-based policing stuff over the last several years. And this is the first one that's come up. And I think, after the last several years, if you divide it, I mean, I know it's been Grass Valley, but if you divide it, not that others don't have the opportunity, if you divide it against, the 3 cities, 20,000 has been the max that's even been asked for over the last however many years. I do think also the approach, we spent a lot of time on this sequential intercept model. And I think that I'll probably get this wrong. This would be intercept probably 1 or 2, I think.
Or 0, yeah.
I think 0 is the act or calling or something, right? It's not like dispatch or something, but whatever. It's before you get to jail and all those kinds of things. But the big focus has been on those 0, 1, 2 intercepts and what can we do with the 0, 1, 2 intercepts. I mean, from my perspective, I mean, I don't see this as something that we could fund in perpetuity, but I do appreciate the look at it. And I also think it's something that especially with the analysts that we have working for us right now, it's something that we could look at from a cost benefit perspective fairly easily to see if there's a reduction in certain things that result in cost to the community that offset this. So, or cost avoidance, I guess, not a cost savings, but.
We're at time again, I want to ask, are you opposed to like coming back and going through, because I still have some questions, and again, commend the, like as Dan was saying, commend the sort of spirit of it, and I would love to further dig into like how it intersects with other case management, as Sam was airing. We have case management all over the place, and so like to me, like coming back through an innovation process, and if Truckee PD wanted to compete for it, they could apply there, or if Sheriff had another program or whoever, like, are you opposed to bringing it back through a process like that?
I'm not opposed to it, but much like the budget process that we're up against here, we're ready to go. I get concerned that it kicks the can down the road. And then it's predicated on the innovation budget. And I feel like it's we're gonna have the same conversation again. So that's where I just don't know if it really makes sense to keep having the conversation. I mean, I'll continue to, if it's a no vote today, I'll just continue to try to find the funding. And that's fine. I mean, that's totally the purview of this body, and I respect that. But I think it aligns directly with what the intent of, the non-incarceration effect of AB 109 is all about. And that's not the discount at all. I think that the jail systems and the realignment from state prison is a significant impact and should be a significant portion of the dollars that come back to our community to help serve that purpose. But I think we can like, I'm of the mind, I'd rather try it. And I'm pretty confident we're gonna have some good results.
All right, so we said we want to move through one by one, so let's start in the same order. So we had the health and human services left over. Can I get a motion to approve the health and human services
Without the veterans.
without the veterans? Make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Everybody unanimous. All right, second was the district attorney's ask. Can I get a motion to approve that? So moved.
Second.
Who was the second one?
Thomas moved his hand right back, but that's a good job. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed?
Sorry.
I second. Let me throw out before you take this last one.
Oh,
Oh, we didn't have a vote yet.
okay. Any abstentions? Okay.
I think in the interest of the budget and in order to hopefully be able to have more conversation around the budget, preserving the right to come back next year if this were to be approved today at the full amount. I'm going to take a chance that I can get the city to support the rest of it and knock this request down to just a flat 100,000, which is an 80,000 delta from the previous years. And at one point we were funded at 45,000 many years ago for the collaborative course. We were never able to bill for that amount. So with the inflation of a dollar, it hasn't. It's not fully thousands. So, but anyway, I'll just knock it down to 100 and hope I can get the support the rest of the way across the finish line.
Sorry, can I ask a question about, sorry, not about that, I know that we're late, but the veterans was like taking the vets proposal out was sort of, I thought, like predicated on the idea that we would have this new innovation process, but that's not really being talked about. So it's just like a no for the vets without a path necessarily for coming back. And I still.
Not necessarily. I mean, we've done an innovation, we have an innovation fund, we've done innovation in the past. And I think the discussion was like including how that rolls out in the future relative to another meeting to have that discussion about budget as a whole and policy and process. Because where we struggled, and I'm speaking for myself now, but where we struggled was like, you know, here's this great program, let's fund it. And then the next year they're like, okay, let's fund it again. And we're like, well, that was just a seed, you know, like,
Well, I think I just want to sort of go on record as saying, like, if like my sort of support for the idea of the process was like, yes, okay, we will continue to advocate. Like I think I feel like I would have advocated more fiercely for the veterans proposal if I was thinking like, oh, we're gonna have to wait a whole nother year for this conversation to happen, or this isn't gonna be funded without like a future process.
Do innovation approval set budget, right?
Yeah, we haven't talked about a placeholder for that to,
Supposed to be on.
yeah, to lock that down like we have in the past. We've actually just put the placeholder and then had the conversations post. But I mean, from the process perspective of this body though, I mean, given that, you know, the Health and Human Services member pulled it out of there, that kind of takes it off the table.
I understand my position.
Yeah.
Totally. But so
This way to like bring that forward as a conversation in a future meeting. So it's not waiting a year, and we are talking about what should our process be for investment in new programs and evaluating their effectiveness. So yeah, that's why I pulled it instead of pushing for it as well. And I'm sorry, I'm still recommending that for the Grass Valley proposal as well.
only right, like that innovation fund has had a cap on it. That's way under the Alex's proposal.
40K total, and I think that's what we had had in past years. And we did 20 a piece. So whether, I mean, if you put a placeholder in for another 40,000, that can be a discussion of, do we fund someone at 30, which is what they had requested, and fund somebody else at 10 or whatever it is once we get to that point. But we should, for budgeting purposes, that's.
I think we have to have the conversation of like, is the purpose of the innovation fund for those not sitting at this table that don't have a like, you know, nonprofits? So it's not like I mean, since Vets isn't competing against, you know, Women in Worth or something like that, like, should we have two different tracks maybe?
Oh, we'll compete.
Gosh, my personal opinion is it shouldn't matter. Yeah, innovation is innovation.
Yeah.
I believe this body should be able to vote on that.
Yeah, there's no like statute that says we have to do that. That's just a philosophical.
To fund county departments or community-based organizations.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll just say, like, as I already discussed, I would like to look at mechanisms to increase that. You've made the point before that the state might be looking at this fund balance at some point. And so, like, what is a strategic use of fund balance? And we can have that discussion and potentially go above that statutory innovation budget fund more significant projects.
So can I get a motion for Grass Valley? Motion.
What number are you doing? That's 100,000 flat rate.
Motion and approved, you approved it too.
Okay. Motion to approve,
All right.
flat rate of 100,000 for the GPP.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Favor, raise your hand. 4, so that's
Oh,
4.
I'll give it one more.
5, okay, so we got 5 and a 7. Right. Those opposed? 2, any abstentions? None. Motion passes. And the last thing before we can get out of here is the innovation fund. And so Angie is nudging me to make sure that if we want to include in this year's budget, that we put a dollar amount as a placeholder in there.
Which can be amended in the future, but it would be nice to have something on the books of it.
So it's 0 right now? Or it's 40,000 right now?
Well, we've done 40,000 in
We
the
haven't-
past.
So it's not set yet.
Yeah.
We have any?
Right, what's the estimated cost of that? That's 30.
And do we have any ongoing commitments to those programs right now?
Same on the juvenile side, some of them, honestly, well, after we approve them, kind of forget about ever billing ever again.
Oh, yeah,
There was also,
Well, yeah.
both juvenile and adult in both the innovation funds, yes.
What if we doubled that amount from 40 to 80 to provide more opportunity and knowing that we don't have to, I mean, we don't have to.
I would just say, since we're cutting into our fund balance based on the new requests, that we absolutely don't increase innovative, because we're gonna be in a potential bind if we don't have the funding. If we have some kind of a state decrease.
You're making me think of something,
The innovation fund is separate from our fund balance that's shown on what you're looking at on your document.
we have 183
$83,000.
in innovation
Yes,
right
right
now.
at the end of this fiscal year.
It can only be spent for innovation fund, that 180.
Or should be.
Yeah, it's its own separate little.
But I, like my, thought of increasing that amount was predicated on like other programs or new programs coming back, and we've decided as a group to fund one, so I think we can keep it at the, whatever that baseline is.
you have 183 fund balance. Will more come into it automatically through the system?
That would be what we would have anticipated at the end of this fiscal year. So, then
The fiscal year we're budgeting for.
yeah. No, sorry, 25, 26.
Okay.
So then that goes up theoretically.
Yeah.
10 years more than
It's
50.
been zero, so
It's not a set
Yeah.
number.
I mean, that's similarly super funded.
If I remember correctly, it's because we didn't do it for long enough, the statute of why it why it has that much money, and I think
Yeah.
that year over year, it's fairly limited, right?
Year over year, I mean, maybe, somewhere in the 24, 25 was bad because we were really low, so we only added like $4,000 to it. But
A high of 60 and a low of 10.
To my point though, if we're increasing the overall budget this year, I agree, this is the voted body. Next year, they're gonna be that much more higher, because I'm not gonna cap at 50%. So we're not gonna have as much in the next year's budget if we put so much more into the innovation grant.
How about we leave it at 40, and then this is another piece of, obviously, this is another piece of that budgeting workshop, or whatever you want to call it, policy workshop.
Can we just put another meeting in place in a few weeks to discuss that further?
Well, you need it for the budget. You see.
yeah, I just need a placeholder number for the budget at this point, unless I don't have one. And then
Well,
we just have to do a budget now.
I will make a motion to leave it at the 40 that it's currently at for this placeholder.
Second. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Everybody? Yes. All right. I think that is, is that everything you need? All right, that's everything. Thank you, everybody.
You still need to.
Yeah.
The meeting is adjourned. I'm not sure how to move people. I don't know people. Or it's your, or I too.
So the evaluations.
I know, it's a process. When teaching me those stats by, is there a deadline to I pass it? Yeah.
Let's say that. That's really expecting you to get. 7 o'clock Friday, so.
Well, to be honest, I kind of, it slipped my mind until I saw you, so I was like, oh no, I didn't use.
I see it all the times.
The PDF finder, but it's much more.
I could probably try to get it to you by like next week.
That's just like for this budget, and so I'm not exactly. What it need, like.
They're not, I can talk to Rachel and see what.
They get to playing.
Yeah, I would say.
Budget, right?
You got it. You
Take
got
care.
Nice to see you.
Take care.
It's almost.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Steve.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we had it previously, but yeah.
It was just long.
Great, but-
It'll just look for the prior year, but it's up to you.
But no, I mean, still nothing to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And most contingents are.
Yeah, you got, as part of that, you got the monitoring stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're trying to be more.
Even keel.
It's funny because,
Downward trend of usage.
Yes.
oh, Judge April, like, shortly after, I know, and it was like, she's always seems very, like, oh, okay. And then it was like, I think the must have just.
I struggle a little bit with kind of the in-between spot here because I'm trying to relay what you're telling me to them.
Yeah.
And then what they're telling me to
Well, I
you.
understand it's their own, they each have their own little.
They do, and I think they also.
Go on, Angie.
Yeah. They feel like they need to
Steve
know.
Johnson, I'll take him all day.
Seems to sleep.
Yeah.
He probably fell asleep.
They need to know